All right, I'm up here in Skull Canyon. Beautiful, pristine setting all by myself so I can read to you. Jack Welch's personal acknowledgments in his foreword. He says, "Intellectually, I'm a lawyer and a law professor who was trained in biblical studies and Greek philosophy. At the same time, I've loved the truths of the Bible and have enjoyed the testimony of the Book of Mormon. For me, these academic and spiritual interests have been mutually synergistic and reinforcing." I like that approach. Combining disciplines into an intellectual, emotional, and spiritual analysis of the Scriptures, that's the best kind. That's the best way, I think. And then he talks about the 50 years of biblical scholarship and biblical law, and how he says it offers new perspectives on the Book of Mormon. By reading these texts as a lawyer would read them, I do not mean to imply that Abraham, Moses, and Jeremiah, or Mosiah, Alma, and Mormon intended us to read their sacred writings the same way that we read legal handbooks and instruction books or secular judicial records. That's not the idea. But once one sees how deeply the judicial cases and other legal matters and materials in the Scriptures are intertwined with the entire fabric of these carefully composed books, it becomes difficult to read them again without seeing legal threads running through the warp and woof of their major ideas and messages, their laws, their ethics, Torah and teachings, their regulations and revelations, and the rights and wrongs are closely bound up together. That's an important insight, because it's like when scientists discovered chaos. James Gleick, in his book on chaos, he said the fascinating thing about chaos was, boy, there's as many bees here as there was in 8 Mile Canyon. Gleick said by ignoring chaos, thinking only to focus on order, we misunderstood the whole nature of chaos until we began to look at it and look for it. Same way with the legal ideas in the Book of Mormon and the Bible and the Scriptures. It all of a sudden becomes apparent that a lot of the Scripture is embedded within this thing we call law. Very interesting. Indeed, law and religion were much more closely aligned in the ancient world than they are in the modern state. In antiquity, and this is a critical difference between them and us, in antiquity, bees are getting me, man. God's will was seen to reside in the judicial resolution of crucial issues. Now, to us moderns, that sounds utterly ludicrous, but not to the ancients. We'll find this in both the Bible and the Book of Mormon. Very remarkably so in Jerem's accusations against Jacob. Very interesting. Thus, the legal cases reported in the Book of Mormon, as in the Bible, are not just about crime and punishment in a secular sense. To the men and women who experience these legal confrontations, those cases are all about the ultimate definitions of righteousness and wickedness, the open differentiation of truth from falsity. The ancients used God's will in their legal issues. That's one of the big differences between them and us. That is precisely what we find in the Book of Mormon. Precisely. And that's why it seems so odd to us. Oh, it's just another one of those fairy tales that Joseph Smith invented and concocted for entertainment purposes and to make himself filthy rich. He didn't get filthy rich, he got persecution. Welch notices something else really interesting. He grew up in the home of a consummate lawyer. He said, upon the advice of my parents, who always held out the hope that I would become a lawyer, and he did. He said, I studied a fair amount of Latin in high school. He said, I developed an interest in the legal orations of Cicero, the laws of the Roman Republican Empire, and the role and development of law in ancient Greece. Then, as a college freshman in one of my Professor Hugh Nibley's Book of Mormon classes at BYU, he said, I realized the intense cultures and the analysis of the various cultures of ancient Israel, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the political and social world out of which Lehi came. He said it became apparent that ancient legal practices and rules never stood very far in the background behind the narratives, the speeches, and events reported in the Book of Mormon. Nibley's command of a wide array of ancient sources and his facility in linking diffused texts enriched his faith, and it moved the inert cerebral mountains of many of his students, mine included. I love that. He moved the inert cerebral mountains. If critics will take the time to study this text, get out of here, B. It may very well move your inert cerebral mountains as well. Wow, there's a lot of bees around here. I'm impressed. This is so good to see all these bees. Except the fact that I'm trying to record here, man. Show some proper respect and due deference. Blasted bees, at least they aren't attacking me. Oh, they're everywhere, though. Get out of here. Anyway, yeehaw! The fun of being a backyard professor. Hey, enjoy Mother Nature. Deseret is the word that the Egyptians called the honeybee. Very interesting, isn't it? They even have a red bee crown and a white bee crown. Nibley talked about that. So anyway, back to where I was. He said he studied Greek philosophy for 2 years at Oxford and law for 3 years at Duke University. He practiced law from 1975 to 1980. He edited and collected a series of studies entitled Chiasmus in Antiquity, which I have, and it's very good. Oh, it's very interesting. I love that book. Use Assyrian texts, Babylonian texts, the Book of Mormon texts, the Bible texts, showing about a chiasmus in antiquity. And it was from that selection that he made friends with several of the biblical scholars, both Jewish and Christian. Kind of interesting there. And he says he went through several legal texts, notably the narrative of Haman's injustice in the book of Esther, the case of the blasphemer in Leviticus 24, and the stoning of the Sabbath breaker in Numbers 15. In this work, I was fortunate to collaborate with Yehuda T. Radé, a faculty member of the Technion in Haifa, on his analysis of chiasmus in the legally rich texts of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, and the book of Ruth. And the book of Ruth reports the legal proceedings at the town gate that made it possible for Boaz to marry Ruth. Professor Radé brought Professor Bezalel Porton of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem into the project. As a lawyer, I was especially intrigued by Porton's discovery of chiasmus in Aramaic legal papyri from 2 family archives from the 5th century BC left by Jewish soldiers who had settled on the Nile island of Elephantine. This is a settlement in Upper Egypt whose residents, like Lehi and Nephi, fled the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem in 587 BC. There's also chiasmus in Ugaritic, Greek, and Latin texts in the Book of Mormon. Now, his idea was this. He said, what I noticed is, get out of there. Reading the Book of Mormon alongside this array of ancient texts yielded a number of favorable and productive literary comparisons. These convergences set the stage for a similar detailed reading of the Book of Mormon with ancient legal principles in mind. So this kind of set the stage for him, is what he was saying. He says in 1979, an invitation from Rex E. Lee, the dean of the formerly new-formed law school at Brigham Young University, to join its law faculty gave me an opportunity to combine my professional interests in law with the study of ancient scriptures. Dean Lee told me that if I would teach one business-related course, I would then be free to teach anything else that I wanted. Almost in jest, but testing to see if what he really meant, I asked, how about a course in Babylonian law in the Book of Mormon? Without a second's hesitation, he smiled and said, that would be perfect. I can't think of anything better.